At 3:15 a.m., military radars detected incoming threats. A series of ballistic missiles speeding toward the U.S. airbase near Doha. Just hours earlier, evacuation protocols were in place. But where did the missiles actually land? And why did this base become Iran's target? There's a critical backstory you need to hear. In the early hours of the morning, radar operations at the U.S. airbase outside Doha noticed a series of readings that left no room for doubt. Ballistic missiles were inbound. These detections triggered a cascade of alerts, with response protocols kicking into high gear. The missiles, launched from Iran, were tracked almost immediately after liftoff. U.S. intelligence later confirmed that a total of 5 medium-range ballistic missiles were part of the assault. The trajectory pointed straight toward the Al Udeid Air Base, a crucial hub for U.S. military operations in the Middle East. To understand why this base was selected as a target, you have to look at its strategic importance. The Al Udeid Air Base isn't just any military installation. It's the largest U.S. air base in the region and a command center for operations spanning from Afghanistan to Syria. It houses thousands of personnel, including U.S. and coalition forces, and serves as a critical logistics and reconnaissance hub. Beyond its operational capabilities, its geographic location makes it invaluable. Fortunately, the base wasn't at full capacity when the missiles struck, or more precisely, attempted to strike. In an extraordinary show of preparedness, evacuation orders had been issued earlier in the day. While no official statements have clarified the exact timing, multiple reports suggest that U.S. intelligence had intercepted chatter indicating a strike was imminent. This forewarning prompted a partial evacuation of key personnel, leaving only a skeletal crew behind to maintain essential operations. When the missiles arrived, the decision to act early likely saved countless lives. But it wasn't just the evacuation that minimized damage. Qatar's advanced air defense system also played a critical role. The Patriot missile battery stationed outside Doha intercepted 3 of the 5 missiles before they could enter the city's airspace. Witness accounts describe flashes in the night sky where the intercepts occurred, underscoring the tense moments as residents braced for the possibility of impact. Remaining 2 missiles veered off target, with one reportedly landing in a remote desert area and the other believed to have malfunctioned mid-flight. While missile defense systems are rarely foolproof, in this case they proved effective enough to prevent a potential disaster. Iranian state media framed the attack as what they described as a proportional retaliation against recent U.S. actions, but their messaging carried layers of ambiguity. They alluded to multiple grievances, ranging from U.S.-led sanctions to the killing of Iranian military leaders in past operations. However, their decision to target a key base like Al Udeid wasn't accidental. It aligned with a reoccurring pattern in Iranian strategy. Military responses framed as symbolic yet precise displays of power. For Iran, this wasn't merely about retaliation. It was about keeping pressure evenly distributed in a region heavily influenced by U.S. military presence. This tactic isn't unprecedented. Iran's use of ballistic missiles has been a recurring element in its responses to U.S. actions, from strikes on bases in Iraq to naval provocations in the Gulf. Each incident adds another chapter to a volatile history, raising questions about the limits of deterrence and what might constitute crossing the proverbial red line. A striking similarity to Iran's previous military actions is hard to ignore, particularly their emphasis on avoiding mass casualties while targeting symbols of U.S. influence. All of this points to one thing: the U.S. knew an attack was coming. The evacuation wasn't just lucky timing, it was a calculated move informed by years of observing Iranian retaliation patterns. But as missiles rained down and defenses kicked in, a greater uncertainty took hold. What comes next for this already fragile region? With Qatar walking a fine line between 2 powers, the attack's implications extend well beyond the immediate aftermath. How they navigate this growing tension will likely define not only regional security, but the broader geographical landscape moving forward. The hours following the missile attack on Al Udeid Air Base were marked by tensions and immediacy in Qatar. As the radar alerts signaled incoming threats, the U.S. Embassy in Doha issued a rare shelter-in-place order instructing American citizens to stay indoors as a precaution against further strikes. This directive echoed the high-alert environment on the ground, with the airspace over Qatar temporarily closed while authorities assess the risk of any additional threats. For residents in Doha, the sight of missile interceptions in the sky and the embassy's urgent warnings underscored the very real dangers of being caught near such a violent conflict. Qatar's official response unfolded quickly but carefully. Qatar Foreign Ministry issued a firm condemnation of the missile launches, emphasizing that the attack had been a grave escalation. At the same time, officials made it clear that they did not believe the missiles were targeting Qatar itself. This distinction was critical for the Gulf nation, which has long sought to maintain delicate diplomatic ties across the region. By stressing that the attack was not directed at them, Qatar effectively signaled their interest in de-escalation and avoided heavy-handed rhetoric that might further inflame tensions. Behind the scenes, Qatar's defense system were key to averting potential disaster. Patriot missile batteries stationed near Doha intercepted the majority of the missiles that entered Qatar's airspace. These systems, deployed in previous years as part of broader defense agreements with the U.S., proved capable of neutralizing the immediate threats. Watching from the city below, witnesses described streaks of light from the interceptions, vivid reminders of the base's proximity to civilian areas. Military analysts pointed out that while no air defense system guarantees total protection, Qatar's readiness to intercept incoming missiles demonstrated both its preparedness and the value of strategic support it receives from the U.S. Balancing act has deep roots. Over the years, Qatar has taken deliberate steps to position itself as a diplomatic broker. It has mediated disputes between Iran and Arab neighbors, negotiating contentious prisoner exchanges, and helped facilitate dialogue between opposing factions in regional conflicts. While these efforts have earned Qatar international recognition, they also leave the country vulnerable during times of heightened conflict. By condemning the attack, while simultaneously playing down its direct implications for Qatar, officials seem to double down on their long-standing strategy: stay neutral whenever possible and mitigate escalation when neutrality is no longer an option. Yet the challenges of such a strategy are growing increasingly apparent. Shortly after the attack, Iran issued a statement through its top security body, claiming that the missiles do not pose any threat to our friendly and brotherly neighbor Qatar. This declaration seemed aimed at reassuring Doha, even as Iranian officials described the strikes as justified retaliation. Meanwhile, Qatar's insistence on regional stability highlighted a stark tension. Can Qatar's proximity to Iran and its geographically vital location allow it to stay insulated from further attacks? At just over 100 nautical miles from Iran's southern coastline, Qatar's geographic vulnerability is hard to ignore. This event raised difficult questions about the country's long-term security and its dependence on U.S. military presence, especially with conflicts in the region showing no signs of easing. For now, Qatar is holding a delicate line. Their swift condemnation of the attack and the rapid success of their defense systems conveyed a clear message. They are committed to protecting their sovereignty without becoming entangled in military escalations. This measured response is a calculated attempt to avoid further destabilization, but the stresses on Qatar's position will only mount as tensions between the U.S. and Iran escalate. Meanwhile, the U.S. defensive and evacuation measures suggest a region on edge where the next move feels increasingly unpredictable. In the early hours of January 8, 2020, Iran launched 13 ballistic missiles at the Ain al-Assad air base in western Iraq. This was a direct retaliation for the U.S. drone strike that had killed General Qasem Soleimani just days earlier. The attack was not subtle. Its scale and precision were a clear message to Washington. While the missiles aimed to showcase Iran's ability to respond decisively, their execution also fit a pattern. calculated military strikes intended to highlight strength without triggering an all-out war. Comparing this to the recent missile attacks on the U.S. airbase near Doha reveals parallels that signal an evolving dynamic in Iran's strategy and the challenges the U.S. faces in anticipating and mitigating such threats. One consistent feature of Iran's retaliation strategy is its use of ballistic missiles to convey power. These weapons are not only technological achievements but also highly visible forms of military pressure. Unlike covert operations or proxy warfare, the use of missiles sends an unmistakable message to enemies and allies alike, one that resonates far beyond the immediate battlefield. For both Ain al-Assad and al-Udeid, the missiles acted as a form of messaging, underscoring Iran's ability to strike deep into U.S. operational zones. The U.S., however, has become increasingly alert to these patterns. Following Soleimani's killing, intelligence agencies intercepted signals suggesting an imminent Iranian response. This advance warning allowed thousands of troops in al-Assad to either evacuate or move to fortified positions. Similarly, in the recent Qatar attack, preemptive evacuations were once again key. Intelligence suggesting elevated threats from Iran prompted U.S. officials to reduce personnel numbers at the al-Udeid base before the missiles even launched. These actions reflect a strategy honed over years of confrontation, leverage advanced monitoring networks, and err on the side of caution when signs of retaliation emerge. The similarities between Ain al-Assad and the al-Udeid attack illustrates a critical point. The U.S. is locked in a pattern of reactive posturing, while proactive evacuations and robust missile defenses underscores the military readiness. They do not entirely mitigate the risks. Now, attention shifts to how the U.S. will adapt further and what Iran's next move might be in the spiraling game of calculated threats and countermeasures. Whether these precautions can hold in the face of future attacks remains an open question, with no straightforward answers. The missile attack on al-Udeid Air Base underscores its critical role in U.S. operations and its vulnerability within a volatile region. Evacuation orders and Qatar's air defenses successfully mitigated the attack's impact, but the incident revealed the fragility of regional stability. Iran labeled this retaliation, framing it as a response to prior U.S. actions, further illustrating the cycle of escalation that continues to define their strained relationship. These calculated moves from both sides highlight the increasing risks to U.S. facilities in the Middle East. With tensions rising, the long-term security of such strategic locations remains anything but certain.